Hey, my name is Josh Korak. I'm a mental health counselor in the Northern Colorado area. In this space, I get the chance to interview professionals in the field, talk about mental illness, self-care, and so much more. With this show, I ask you to join me in doing what one of my favorite philosophers, a Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, says. Smile, breathe, and go slowly. This is Care with Korak. Hey everyone, welcome back to Care with Korak. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, Mr. Cody Bradford. Cody has been a professional rock climber and outdoor guide for many years now. Cody is an AMGA certified rock guide, AMGA certified single pitch instructor, and an AMGA single pitch instructor assistant program provider. For those of you who don't know, the American Mountain Guide Association, or AMGA, is the organization that creates standardizations for the mountaineering field and to become a certified guide in the States. Because Cody is such a badass of an outdoorsman, he did his part of the interview in the wild woods of Washington. It was also my first interview I did for this podcast. As such, our internet connection wasn't always the greatest, so just make sure you hang in there with us through the bumps in this episode that I wasn't able to iron out. Cody and I met online about 2 years ago now. I've been following Cody on Instagram for a few years now, and because he frequently posts about different rock climbing tips and instructional videos, which climbing nerds like me eat up. For those of you who don't know me, I love rock climbing. I've been climbing since I was 12 years old. Shout out to Ben Anderson. Hope you're listening. I competed competitively throughout high school, and it wasn't until college that I took climbing outdoors, which is where all the fun is at. The reason Cody and I met is because my friend Brett and I won a guided trip with Cody at Red Rocks, Las Vegas, through an Instagram giveaway. Of course, this happened literally right before the pandemic started, and we haven't been able to get out to climb with him yet. But we've stayed in contact since, and I thought he would be a wonderful guest to have on the show to provide a unique perspective and to help show that mental health shows up in so many different ways in our lives and in the world. In this episode, we talk about Cody's history in becoming an outdoor guide, with some fun climbing stories mixed in. We also get to talk about the concept of flow, suicide, and how the outdoors saved Cody's life, and also Bo Burnham. Make sure to stick around for the whole episode to hear a lot of great things. Also, an update. September is National Suicide Prevention Month. All month, mental health advocates, prevention organizations, survivors, allies, and community members unite to promote suicide prevention awareness. I'm glad that I get to have an episode this month where we do get to have a small discussion around this subject, and I'm so grateful that Cody is vulnerable and opened up about his own experiences with suicide. If you've been having thoughts of suicide, reach out for support. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. Message me on my social media at Josh Korak if you're needing more support, and I'd be more than happy to help you find your local mental health crisis center. For everybody else, don't be afraid to ask others if they're struggling with suicide. Be there for them, keep them safe, help them stay connected, and follow up with them. If you're wanting to learn more about how to support those struggling with suicide, an easy resource is to go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org for more information. Make sure to check out Cody's Instagram as well, at Cody Bradford, and check out his website, codybradford.com. For anyone who's just itching to travel from the pandemic, Cody is co-leading a climbing trip to Spain for any skill level later this year. So make sure to check that out on his website, which I will link in the description below. All right, let's jump into it. This is Care with Korak with Cody Bradford.
Hey, Josh, can you hear me?
Hey, Cody. How's it
Hey,
going,
man.
man?
Oh, it's going okay. These man, it's really funny. You're catching me at like such a funny little moment here.
Yeah, tell me what's going on.
No, it's okay. I was just like getting some work done for some companies that um, I've been working for, some photography things. I'm going to take this one headphone out. Just some photography things that they wanted for some advertisements, and so I'm just like sitting here with a camera and like all the files are open and everything, and all of a sudden I realized I was like, oh no. I just happened to open my email at that time.
Right.
Anyway, man, yeah, but you caught me at an interesting time in terms of we
Mhm.
just moved back. It's another reason everything's a little chaotic at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I'm just sitting outside of our yurt.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we're things are literally everywhere. My van's like wide open, and um,
So
yeah. So it was
where
when you
are
reached
you, like
out, I was
location wise?
Mazama, Washington. That's kind of central northwest Washington. It's like right at the base of the Cascades.
Yeah, that's great. I
Yeah.
was up in Bellingham not too long ago, a few weeks ago. It's not too far from there.
School things or
No, just visiting family.
okay. Yeah, excellent. I didn't realize that are you from Bellingham? Or are you
Just have some family up there. I'm from Colorado originally.
okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man. I was psyched to be on this. You had, brought up the thing of mental health, and I was like, whoa, no way. I actually just sought out a therapist for the first time.
Yeah.
The stress of the fires and everything and work, and I canceled all my August work, and then you reached out. I was like, whoa, that, like, I'm an atheist, but like at the same time, I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
God.
Those
Totally. So, yeah, this looks great, man. Your studio looks awesome. Yeah, I love the design. Yeah, so way to go.
Thanks. It's good to finally, be with you and talk with you. And it's just, it's a bummer that we haven't been able to do this sooner given everything. But man, I'm still excited to come out and climb with you someday soon, hopefully. Uh
Yeah,
and yeah, I'm just glad we get to talk tonight, and I'm sure it's gonna be a really interesting discussion. So
yeah, totally. So, perfect, man. That sounds good. Well, hope you're okay if I have a beer in my hand and
oh yeah. You're just rocking the outdoor life, and I love it. I just
I'm literally in it. Yeah, you've been in school and
yeah.
yeah, are you now I apologize for my ignorance, but where are you in the school
No,
process
don't
right now?
apologize. Yeah, so basically all I have left is my internship for
Okay,
school. And so right now I'm doing that at a local private practice, and then just working full time alongside that. So I'm up in northern Colorado, which is not close to the mountains, unfortunately. I mean, it's not too far, but um,
sure.
far enough. And definitely have had to put a
Great.
pause on some of those outdoor pursuits that I once really chased after. So that's been kind of a bummer. So I live vicariously through your videos and some of the other friends I have, and um, but hopefully we'll get back into it someday soon. So I just have until December, hopefully, and then I'll be done. So
And just so that I know too, specifically what credential are you seeking at the moment?
yeah, so ultimately I'd be looking for what's called a licensed professional counselor, an LPC, uh,
Okay,
which is generally what it the same thing in different states. Sometimes they have a different title, um, but basically after December I'll have my master's degree, and then I'll be able to start working towards my license, which takes another, I don't know, 2 years, I think. So
okay, great. My we could geek out on this forever, so we can. But my
no,
partner's starting grad school with Prescott College, doing an online curriculum for mental health counseling, and yeah, so I'm sure that
yeah,
yeah. Anyway,
yeah, I mean, we could totally geek out on it. And if she ever has any questions, I've got some experience now.
yeah, cool, man. Well, congratulations. Yeah, and
Yeah.
thanks for again for reaching out. I'm Yeah, this has been something I'm sure I'm gonna have just as many questions for you
Mm.
as you'll have for me.
Oh, I'm
So
sure. Yeah, no,
yeah, I'm very curious.
yeah, no, I'm excited. This is something that I wasn't sure I was like actually going to pursue or not. Like I'm, who knows how this is going to turn out. You're my first, interview, so I don't
No,
know if you'll be the first one I put out there. But whenever my listeners are listening to this, this is the first like interview we're doing. So I'm very honored and humbled to have you on the show.
I will be sure to give you proper editing challenges since I talk so much. So I'll try to keep the energy based.
I'm sure it'll be quite a journey. So
Great.
well, cool. Why don't we just, start off by talking a little bit about you and your background and experience. I'm gonna kind of have a little introduction in the beginning, but just telling us about, how you got into the climbing industry, what that journey's kind of been like for you, what some of your experience has been.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, I'm Cody Bradford. I'm an AMGA certified rock guide. I got my rock guide credential from the American Mountain Guides Association in 2018, and that was a culmination from starting from I grew up in fairly to really poor parents in the inner city of Roanoke, Virginia, and I didn't really know the difference between a knot and a canoe. And he ultimately where I wound up was in Greensboro, North Carolina, as a musician, and that was the path I thought I would be on, playing bass in a studio, and I really thought that's the direction I was going to go in. And through some life events and some rock bottom events, I ended up in Boone, North Carolina, where I ultimately was in community college there, and then eventually transferred over to Appalachian State University, where I met where was going to be the rest of my life, which was wonderful people in the recreation community. I ultimately studied recreation management, and learned a lot about public lands and how we manage them, and also how we permit them and ensure their existence. And ultimately, that school also had a great outdoor program that was robust, encouraging of young students being able to not only lead trips, but also to not only be on trips, but to lead them and to also create them and then market them, get our own permits for them. I got to really go through this very serious apprenticeship, and I ended up working for the North Carolina Outward Bound School, and that eventually led me to meeting a man named Ron Funderburk, also a person named Jeremiah Haas, and a few others that ultimately showed me about the American Mountain Guides Association. Like, hey, did you know that you could take your passion for climbing and teaching climbing? Before climbing, it was whitewater kayaking, but I really found a love for the process of climbing and doing big objectives, and I found that I really loved all of the like technical work behind making yourself more efficient in the mountains, through not just your movement, but through all of the pieces and components. And then, yeah, after Outward Bound, that pretty much led me to them. And I got my SPI in 2012. I took my first rock guide course in 2014. I ultimately ended up taking my exam in 2018. And ever since then, I've been continuing down the track towards my IFMGA pin, the International Federation of Mountain Guide Associations. And that's where we are now, is we're just going through that process, learning along the way.
Man, that's so cool to hear your story. And wow, I can see some similarities too in my story and how I got into the climbing world, and it's cool to see those connections.
No way.
Yeah, for real. For those who are listening, for the purpose of this being a mental health podcast, when I hear AMGA, SPI, I know what you're talking about. What can you help explain some of that for maybe the average listener who maybe isn't in the climbing world?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. It's good insight. So the AMGA is the American Mountain Guides Association. They are the American representation of the International Federation of Mountain Guide Associations, based primarily out of Switzerland, who uh, essentially set the standards for mountain guide, mountain guide discipline across the world for the membered countries. And I believe there are 23 member countries, but that number seems to always be changing. So I apologize if that's not actually the number. The way that it works here, even though in the United States we do not officially recognize mountain guiding as a profession, so therefore it is not regulated. This is all voluntary. I choose to be, those of us who are in the program choose to do this, to undergo this in the United States, whereas in France it's mandatory. It's illegal to guide there without that credential, without the IFMJ credential.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and so here in the US, a lot of individuals, especially growing up on the East Coast like me, will start out with the single pitch instructor program, which starts with a 3-day course, and then eventually on your own merits will and decision making will take a 2-day exam component. And it's a pass fail, pass no pass situation. So you are gauged on a series of facets, which are actually in the middle of being changed right now. Like it's a constantly updating field. And then from there you can choose to continue in down what they call the guide track. So that's one instructor track. There's also the climbing wall instructor program. That's in the instructor track. And then over here is like the guide track. I'm gesturing over here to the other side now. And in the guide track in the United States, we break it up into rock, alpine, and ski, ultimately leading to your IFMGA pin upon completion of all of those courses and exams, which is an incredible amount of hours of work. 3 courses minimum per discipline, plus external courses like avalanche courses and whatnot that you have to complete in order to get them. So that's the program in a very large nutshell.
Yeah, thanks for trying to simplify such a complex thing. I mean, I just want to brag on you and say, it is not an easy thing to become, AMGA certified. There's a lot of different experience having to go into that, and you definitely have to be more than just the average rock climber, which in Colorado there's tons of. And so,
yeah, a lot of Colorado climbers out there for sure that are in the program.
Right.
Have done it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you have to know more than just how to climb. Like there's so many safety issues, so many technical skills, which you are the king of. You are Tech Tip Tuesday.
No, I won't accept king, but I will accept that I've put in some work for it for sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely, I'll probably say it again at the end, but I'll definitely be linking your Instagram handle to the episode and making sure that people check you out. So he's got some really cool videos of different technical tips, instructional guides, how-to videos, all sorts of things from all different skill levels. So it's really cool to see.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Well, cool. So, I mean, thinking about climbing, what has been your favorite space to climb?
My favorite space to climb, I can talk about it in terms of style. I really like Red Rock.
Mm-hmm.
In Las Vegas. It's very reminiscent of the style I enjoyed in North Carolina, where so in rock climbing, you can often be climbing a crack, using your body as the holds by putting your body parts into the crack and then making holds out of them. You can be climbing slab where there are no holds. You're just climbing up a homogeneous shield of rock that's lower than 90 degrees in angle. And you can be climbing face, where you are climbing similar to like a ladder, but the holds aren't necessarily ladder rungs. They're just randomly they're sporadically distributed across the wall, and how you move your body between them becomes important. And so what's so cool about Red Rock and North Carolina and lots of areas in North Carolina, you get a lot of that all on one climb. You could get all of that on one pitch of climbing, or like a rope length or less of climbing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's what I love so much about it, is that I love climbing that takes all of your skills and packages them into one experience, or like one pitch of climbing, or many pitches of climbing in a day. I love the multitude of styles where you have to react and know how to react to different things. So it's a very cool apprenticeship that you put yourself through in order to get that. So I think the style of climbing I love the most. And Red Rock in Las Vegas just happens to be the place that sums that up the best for me.
Yeah. Dang, you're making me all the more excited to come out and climb there. I've never had that kind of experience. I mean, I've probably had maybe a mixture of two of those styles of climbings, but never three. So that'll be really cool to hopefully experience one day.
Oh, Josh, love to have you. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Um, okay, just kind of staying on climbing because I just love nerding out about this. What's been your most harrowing climbing story? Because those are always fun to talk about.
Harrowing climbing story. Um, so this is actually what's quite interesting to me is that I haven't had per se really like on the edge of life kind of climbing stories.
Which is how it should be, right? That
Yeah.
you know you have a good climbing guide.
I think that it is a partly that when I'm on sighting, I am just so careful, especially in like alpine rock, which I feel like is where this story goes and where a lot of things happen, just because there's so many more factors that are unpredictable, that are out of your control. The weather changes more quickly because of the elevation and the sudden elevation change, and yeah, it's just more, and that's what this has to do with. So in 2011 or 2012, anyway, I was on Long's Peak, and we were on the diamond on the casual route, and we were about 4 pitches up. We were on this traversing pitch. It's kind of like the pitch that is really exciting for most people because it's protected minimally. And a thunderstorm came in, and it was about 10 a.m., which is really early for a thunderstorm to be rolling in. And this was in August. And suddenly this storm cloud rolls in, and I had finished the traverse. My partner's coming across. The belay isn't that comfortable. At least I don't remember it being that comfortable. And this thunderstorm rolls in, and it starts hailing. It's like a little bit of rain, and then it immediately starts hailing. And because of the steepness of the wall, you would think it would shelter us a little bit, but instead it was kind of accelerating the little balls of hail like right down into our laps. And so like this hailstorm happens, and we're just hanging there, just like curled in. Like, you can't see what I'm doing right now, but I'm just like, I'm curled in to my body. We're just like putting my helmet down over as much of my body as I can. And just little pings are getting, my helmet later had little pings in it from the hailstones. And in that moment, we're like, should we go down? And just, being silly, irresponsible 24-year-old, I was like, no, we're going to keep going. And as so we climb, because the storm ends and the sun actually comes back out, hence like feeding our confidence to keep going. Sun comes back out, and we make it most of the route, and then we get to Table Ledge, which is close to the top. Don't have that much longer to go, and the next series of hail rolls in, and it starts hailing harder than the first time, and this time it like doesn't just go away. And so now we're stuck there. We had this like pretty heavy like tarp. I have no idea why we brought it. It's not a thing. We were teaching ourselves at the time how to be out there in those elements, thinking like, what should we bring? I don't know. And then this tarp, this Walmart blue tarp, was just something we had in one of our backpacks. And I'm so happy we brought it, because even though it was crappy in our backpacks, taking up so much room, these little packs we had, we put it over ourselves and made a little tent, and we were able to actually sit it out. And it was actually really beautiful. We were freezing cold, at 14,000 feet. Yeah, at 14,000 feet, freezing cold. But somehow in that moment, it was a little rainbow in the distance. It was both harrowing and beautiful all at the same time. And I think it was one of those rare moments where someone like myself, who doesn't always handle internal stress very well, I guess all stress is internal anyway, who doesn't handle stress very well, I found that moment so peaceful. So the storm never end of the story is that the storm never let up. We ended up summiting in the storm, and no lightning was happening in this immediate moment. But as we started descending off of the summit down the keyhole route, all of this lightning started to chirp around us, and our decision was just like, we're just going to keep going. And hail is piling up, and we're just descending with a rope on, like simul down climbing. And that was a terrible idea, because if any of us had fallen,
Yeah.
It would have been awful. And yeah, so now like we end up getting back to our tent, just we're soaking, we crawl into the tent soaking wet. I rip the floor of the tent because I'm like, your body like is all wet and it gets caught on like anything at that point. And now we're just there riding out this storm with our crappy tent, getting like pounded in by wind. And then finally at 10 p.m. the storm finally relents a little bit. And yeah, we're cold, our sleeping bags got wet, and like it was just, yeah, we didn't sleep. We started hiking down at like 3 o'clock in the morning because we're like, we need to get to the car now. And we get back to the car at like 7 a.m. the next morning, and it was just like,
Wow.
whoa, did we send? I mean, by the way, we did not send. I mean, like I pulled on gear. I was like, it was way above my pay grade. So
Like
it's funny
full
because
mission.
yeah, that story worked out as good as it could, right? I mean, it's really not. I can't call it an epic because, but it was kind of the first moment where like I was really in the mountains. Like I'm North Carolina fella. I had experienced plenty of thunderstorms, but not like that. Like not in the Alpine snow and hail, and so.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest reaction is like, oh, typical Colorado weather. I mean,
Mhm.
that's like an afternoon, and I feel like every kind of, especially when it comes to weather, every kind of crazy climbing story that involves weather, it's usually the diamond route, on longs and
Yeah.
Estes.
Yeah.
And like, yep, that's it.
I
Yeah.
later went up to climb for Vertical Sanctuary, and we had perfect weather. And it
Mm.
was amazing how much easier it felt, not only having been there before, and this is, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I just didn't have the on-site fatigue. I wasn't being there for the first time, even though the route was different. I had touched that rock before. I knew where I was. And even though I like also really didn't send quote unquote Vertical Sanctuary, I just, it felt so much more comforting. And then having good weather. I mean, it's amazing what all those factors play into how your brain works. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah, I'm sure that'll definitely come up more, talking about some of those different factors that goes into climbing, in terms of, some of the, um, what do I want to say, the mental fitness, I guess is probably the best way to describe it, mental fitness, that is needed for climbing, almost more than physical fitness, I could argue. Maybe it just depends on the person, but um and the kind of climbing you're doing, but
yeah, climbing is cool because it is a holistic challenge. And
oh yeah.
it's not only physically challenging where you have to condition your body to deal with these vertical rigors, but you're also dealing with a psychological or a cognitive challenge of knowing how to use this gear correctly, uh, how to tie into your rope correctly. Even, I mean, from that all the way up to protecting yourself on the route, and then the emotional challenge, just because it's really scary often. And so it's cool how it's a well-rounded sport.
Yeah, yeah. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Just, this idea of, obviously there's this physical component, but maybe for the casual listener who doesn't climb, they may be thinking, okay, yeah, obviously climbing can be scary, but that's climbing. What kind of really goes into, maybe speaking to your own experiences, you could kind of dip into maybe clients you've had over the years, but what has been, maybe some challenges that you and others have faced, maybe, in terms of their mental health, in terms of some of those psychological struggles that you're mentioning, and how does that really play into climbing?
So I am seeing a counselor mental health counselor for the very first time. And well, that's not totally true. I saw a psychologist when I was a teenager, and seeing a mental health counselor now for the first time, coming up here in a week or so.
Which I just want to say is like really cool. I mean, brave in and of itself, and in, working in an industry that is so, uh typically, shies away from that, and maybe that's just speaking from my experience. I'm sure you could probably speak better to that, but from an industry that kind of keeps that hush hush and like, "Oh, let's just do the climb, we're not kind of dip into our feelings." um So to be able to reach out for support in that sense, I think is really brave, and it says a lot, about you and your character.
I appreciate it. It takes a lot. Like, I definitely grew up with the mentality of this. My family just kind of gave me the whole typical, I grew up in the South, bootstrap mentality, even though they didn't, they weren't given anything either. And it's taken me a long time to evolve, and those beliefs, and really drop those by the wayside, and realize that asking for help isn't an inherent bad thing. I think in the way it relates to climbing, though, I think that it is if it outside of guiding, just climbing itself, I think that it manifests in different ways for everybody. So I can only speak to myself. For me, it's always been, I am a perfectionist, and with my Instagram's a great example. Not always, because I've gotten better at it, but I often will self shoot these, and I will just do 100 takes. That's over exaggerating, but I will do so many takes because I want something to be perfect. And what I struggle with still in climbing, just from a raw climbing perspective, whether it's sport climbing or whatever, if I get up and a move doesn't feel right, I perform something and it doesn't feel like I did the move correctly, or I didn't go up the pitch with style, it doesn't even matter who I'm with. It turns inward, and it's almost like I get self-conscious in front of myself. I turn inward, and I will often have the negative reaction of like, oh, I just made that look so terrible. And
yeah, a lot of self-criticism.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a lot of that in climbing because we watch climbers that have been on the pedestal for so long and this is not a take on them, a hot take on them or anything, because they often are not judgmental or anything. But who we put on a pedestal, we compare ourselves to them eventually. And this isn't even a beginning to get into like people of color in climbing who haven't had themselves represented for a long time. So this is only from my perspective alone, right? And that even if you ignore part of that, you have internalized it some way regardless. And so for me, climbing represents itself in mental health in a negative way, in that it feels like it needs to be a certain way and that you need to do it performed a certain way. As a guide, it comes out negatively as I feel that I needed to do better because I'm at this standard that I've been measured at, and I need to always at minimum measure up to that standard regardless of anything. Which is unsustainable, right? Because there are just going to be days. In a positive way, just climbing outside of guiding gives me a lot of ways to compartmentalize all of the things that are wrong, because on a day, even when I'm not necessarily climbing well, it still tells me a lot about my body, where my body is just physiologically, from being able to like, oh, like that knee was giving me issues the other day, but now I can backstep and it feels totally fine. To it gives me a way to measure how my headspace is that day, where I might be quite far above my gear, but I'm able to place more calm into my head, because it's like, well, when you don't have the option to fall, then your head does a pretty funny thing often, at least mine does, where, and this isn't always, but generally it's able to kind of shut down, put all that away, and only focus completely on the task at hand. Mike Reardon, a famous climber who tragically passed away in Scotland, he's from LA. He called it the 8-foot eggshell that's around you, and you only notice anything in that eggshell. Everything else, like, doesn't affect you. And so I think positively, it gives you this wonderful framework to concentrate within. And I think that that's very good for managing, especially like an ADHD brain, like I feel like I sometimes have. Maybe I'm not ADHD, I don't actually know. Yeah, it gives me a space to compartmentalize, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm hearing a couple things in there. I hear kind of what you're describing. There's kind of a term or a concept in psychology for that, and it's this idea of flow, where
Yes.
I'm sure you've probably heard of it, and I probably won't describe it the best, but this idea of being able to focus on one thing so intently, even more so than just in a mindfulness aspect, because you're so in tune with what you're doing to the point where you could be, I think of like maybe playing the guitar or something. You could be playing the guitar for hours and not even realize that that much time has passed because you're just um, fully immersed in what you're doing and you're in that kind of Zen state almost.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Who was it that coined Mihi Csikszentmihalyi did originals research on it, I believe, and then I'm not sure who came up. I can't remember who came up with the term flow. But yeah, it's a wonderful state to be in, and I think anyone. The cool thing is that anyone can have it. It's whatever you're good at, and I think that's why passions are so good. Like hobbies, we call them hobbies passively, but I think a hobby or just a passion, something that you can figure out that you're really good at, helps you experience that state. And I don't know of any psychological research that's been done on it that says that that has long-term positive health benefits, but
Oh yeah.
climbing's been that for me. And I think it's been really wonderful in these times of COVID and
Mhm.
now what I'm calling the COVID hangover. Um,
Yeah.
we're able to climbing has just been and mountain sports in general is just this cool way of there's always a like a true north, there's always a true north star. Like everything else can be falling apart, but you have this thing that brings you so much joy and pain and happiness and sorrow and melancholy and literally every emotion all wrapped up into one universe, and it can be completely independent of everything else. And so it's just been, I would argue the mountain culture in general has just been a bastion of hope for me.
Yeah, I mean, that was leading into my next question. Why the outdoor world? Why this outdoor space? Have you chose it to really pursue it in such an intense and passionate way? What has it done for you? How has it played into your, I don't know if identity is the right word, but maybe in just how you identify, and things like that.
Am I allowed to talk about suicide on here?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I attempted suicide in 2008, in February of 2000, or yeah, end of late February 2008, and by taking loading up on barbiturates, and I woke up in the hospital, and I had a person there who her name is Caroline Clark. Um, she told me that I needed to get out physically
Mhm.
from the the pain that I was feeling. And the way I took that was I needed to leave everything. And so I did. I got up, I packed everything a couple of days later, and I left and I moved to Boone. Um, and I I still have a few friends that I had during that time, and some other, other things happened during that summer, and that were both amazing and sad, and just it was quite life changing. And when I got to Boone, I didn't have anyone, and so it was completely new, and everyone there was in recreation. Was did something. They had a passion. They were a whitewater kayaker. They were a sea kayaker. They were a surfer. They were a climber. They were a hiker, backpacker, whatever. They were a mountain runner. I mean, everything, paragliders, even, everything was there. There's this old film from the Banff Mountain Film Festival tour from 2009 or 2010 called The Red Helmet. And I saw that film, and this was after I'd already kind of moved into this whole genre, but I saw that film and it perfectly symbolizes everything that I loved. You can still YouTube that, the Red Helmet.
Yeah.
Um, it was I stepped into those mountains, and I just felt a draw. I also, I think, like many white kids did at the time, I read John Krakauer's Into the Wild, and then
Uh,
subsequently saw the movie and fell in love with Christopher McCandless's story, and that piece of it, but and started to go off, kind of alone. But eventually, the community around recreation was just so uplifting, even in the most negative times.
mm,
There was still, like, I learned the concept of feedback and how you give and receive feedback. Receiving feedback being probably the most important thing I learned during that time, of like, hey, Cody, you did this really well. And this is the thing that you can get a lot better at, because I noticed you did X, Y, Z a few times. And these are the examples, and this is how you can make that a lot better in the future. And that structure that it gave my life, and
mm,
the need to eat well and be healthy and not drink too much, not do drugs too much, not uh, always like be keep your body in this physical state ready for doing the thing you love, put my mind in a better place to actually, again, like I said, compartmentalize just everything that was happening in my brain to put it towards a passion. And I think the wonderful thing about all of these sports is that it does that inherently. It's not something we have to artificially create. When you're climbing, this is what gravity will do, and this is how you combat that from happening. And it's just loose enough that how you do that becomes an art form in and of itself. And then you have personal expression. And I think that's probably what did it for me the most.
yeah, it sounds like, the outdoor spaces, allowed you to be yourself and to be able to express yourself in these different ways while also providing this certain sense of structure that's kind of just natural to the world. It kind of speaks to this natural order of the world and the earth. And it sounds like that was obviously really life changing for you to be able to step into that world and to have some of that, put in place for you and to be able to discover some of that.
Yeah, I still separate my life to the time before 2000. And it's funny because most people don't look back at 2008 and have good memories.
Right.
But I separate 2008. 2008 is my dividing line between my life now and what my life was. And even though I was quite young at the time, I was only 19 or 20, I believe. 2008, I was 20. I separate my life into those two zones,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is before or after that.
Yeah. How does that kind of affect you now? Kind of having this before and after type of story with your life.
It is still pretty heavy. For the first 5 years that I was there, I graduated from Appalachian State after 5 years of schooling in 2012. And I moved right into Outward Bound. It was like an immediate right into this professional life of existence of like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I got into a wonderful relationship with my partner because of Outward Bound that I'm with now. We've been together for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
It has given it yeah. And in that time, I've gone through the rock program of the AMGA. I'm in the Alpine program now. I've dived into skiing, and I've fallen in love with skiing. And all of that time, I've always felt like there was a piece from that time period, that 5 year time period from 2008 onward, that I wasn't feeling. I was like, wow, I used to step into I used to pull up to a vista, these cloud filled valleys. And I think I wrote this down in a journal somewhere. It's like, always look into the cloud filled valleys, and that'll always bring you back to baseline. I remember writing that somewhere. Well, I haven't felt that viscerally in so long. And
Mm-hmm.
recently, it's been exacerbated. COVID, again, what I call the COVID hangover, because it actually wasn't during COVID that I felt that bad. COVID actually gave me a lot of space to work on myself personally. But now we're in the COVID hangover, at least I am, and these fires happened, and we had to leave our yurt, and all of a sudden we're completely uprooted, and I feel untethered and unleashed from everything. And I just felt myself slipping back into those old habits of self-deprecation and momentum, or inertia rather, was just so hard to overcome. I canceled pretty much most of my August work just because I couldn't mentally handle everything that was happening. And I have recently been trying to again figure out where baseline is, where the true north is. And, climbing wasn't giving that to me. I can't ski right now. We had the heat dome that wiped out all of the snow pretty much in the Pacific Northwest. And so I had to really dive inward again. And I actually watched Bo Burnham's Inside,
Yeah.
which for the edgy straight white males out there, like, watch it. I mean, hell, even if you're not, I mean, just watch it. I think it's an amazing artistic piece. And that grounded me, ironically enough. Like, I watched that, and I watched it a few times now, actually. I think I watched it 3 times now. And it really compartmentalized for me again. I use that word a lot, but it's just because my brain needs order. I was like, oh, these are the things I'm feeling right now. This is what I went through last year.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm feeling the effects of that from the world being brought down. And there's other things happening too. I mean, we don't have to get into it. Just like figuring out like what I want to do, and with my online presence and all these other things, I'm basically an identity crisis of sorts. And that's what I've been dealing with recently. It's actually why I just decided to seek out a therapist. It's why I've decided to cancel my guiding work for this month and pretty much most of next month as well, and focus on myself and figure out where my motivations lie, what kind of structure I can have, even when I don't have a structure to work within. And that's probably, I've been talking forever now, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, first off, just thanks for sharing all that. I mean, that was a lot of vulnerability, which again is not easy to be able to talk about. Your past mental health struggles and your current struggles with your mental health, and that is not easy at all. And again, shows a lot of bravery, a lot of strength, and I think that's important to recognize, right? I think with a lot of difficult things like suicide, like depression or anxiety, or some of those other mental health struggles, I think one of the simplest and yet most challenging things that we can do is to bring it to light, right? To be able to talk about it with others, because that in and of itself, it relinquishes some of that power it holds over us. Or at least that's what I believe. I think that's been the most helpful for me in my mental health, and my past mental health struggles, is to be able to just share, as a simple yet complex first step, because it starts to take away some of that power, and bringing it into the light, out of this kind of darkness, if you will, that mental illness really likes to thrive in, right? Really likes to be alone. It really likes to isolate us, and to be able to come together in community with others and share that, I think, is really powerful.
Yeah, and thanks. I appreciate that. And what's so interesting is that I've never necessarily, I've always been pretty comfortable just talking about myself. I mean, if anyone asks me about anything, I share it out there, and I always have. But it's funny what I've realized recently, keeping things internalized, is lately in this kind of like who I am, what do I want to give to the world,
Right.
and like like, where is my place in a positive way in the world, where it's going to leave people kind of better than I found them, so to speak. It has really been, let me make sure I stay on this train of thought. I just, it's been weird how as someone who's comfortable enough talking about these things like I am, it's been very interesting to me how I have really not been honest with myself about where I am. And I think seeking out this mental health counselor has been a part of that. It took me, my partner asked me over and over again, like, she's been amazingly supportive of me throughout this. And even despite the fact that she's going through a lot of the same things.
Sure.
And, she asked me so many days in a row, have you reached out to the mental health counselors yet? Have you reached out? And I'm like, well, like health insurance, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you worked for Outward Bound, and Outward Bound's giving you 4 free sessions with a mental health counselor. I'm like, okay, just send it my way, and it's like, well, okay. And so I called them, and it was amazing, because then in that moment, what I realized was that, like, oh yeah, like, I still don't ask for help at all. I don't reach out. And I realized, like, wow, I have completely isolated myself from everybody. And I think maybe everyone's done that to a degree in this last couple years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And, climbing is a partner sport. And I actually also want to, shout out to my friend Mario Stan, who in Dallas, who also has a podcast. I was on with him last year too. Him and I spoke. We were actually supposed to climb together this week. We're supposed to be climbing together right now. And he used the term, decommit. Like, you need to be comfortable decommitting to things when you're not going to be there and be available as a partner. I mean, that's not how I'm paraphrasing completely, but he used that term decommit. And what it made me realize is that, wow, it's funny, because I've isolated myself completely. So that was the first realization. The second realization I had to come to is that I've I've isolated so much that now I need to decommit from all these obligations I've given myself in order to not isolate anymore, to feel comfortable to be around people again. And again, it's really funny. Having this conversation with you isn't uncomfortable. Being around people around here isn't uncomfortable. It's getting to that point. It's like I hide all the time. Like, I only post my tech tips once a week. I could do way more than that, right? I mean, like, I have enough of a following that I could give them a lot more, and I'm scared to, because I'm truly scared of, like, being in front of the camera. And it's amazing how much more self-conscious, and isolated I've gotten over the last couple of years, and I'm dealing with that now. And it's been kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's kind of two things there, right? There's, how this has been kind of explained to me in the past, is there's this like big T truth, right? The truth is, you're working on this, you're aware of it, right? You recognize that you have been pretty self-critical of yourself over the past, and you are dealing with some of the self-consciousness and self-criticism, and there's this little T truth of this really this is shit, right? This is shit that I'm going through, this that I haven't been honest with myself, and it's really hard, right? So there's almost this both and of like, okay, why, like, I should be honest with myself. I should be more gracious with myself, maybe. And the reality is I'm not, right? And that's okay too. It's okay with where I'm at right now, I guess, is maybe the best way to say that. Allowing yourself that space to hold both, and say, you know what, this has been a really hard couple of years, and it's been a normal reaction for a lot of people to isolate. We were forced to isolate, essentially, right? We were forced to stay home, to not be able to go to work, and to do the things that maybe we normally do to help cope with our mental health. And so I'm hearing a little bit of both, and I'm hoping that you can also just allow space for both, and recognizing that neither one of them is maybe perfect, but allowing space of reality, right? Saying they're both true, Right. One of them is just maybe more objective truth, and one of them is a little bit more subjective, and it's both.
Bet you didn't think you'd be in a counseling session this evening, huh?
I know, right? This is not counseling, full disclosure.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, yeah, so no, I think so, for putting that in perspective, yeah, so that's, I mean, I just hope people listening, I mean, understand that that is something that someone who is a professional at this is good for, and that you can reach out to. So yeah, like I'm going to take full advantage of it. Like I believe in experts who are really, really good in their field and have put the time in, and I'm very much looking forward to speaking to someone about it.
Good. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you've been able to reach out and find that support.